Yo, 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 yo. What's up, what's up, what's up? Give up the rock. Well, I'm coming in real loud here. He's coming in hot. Gotta pull that down a little bit. Hello, my fellow revolutionaries. It is Friday from where I am coming from here in Australia. So it's almost the weekend. A special time for the working class. And so if that weekend applies to you, and it's something that you are looking forward to, it being just around the corner. Solidarity with you. I hope you enjoy the small part in the weekly schedule that has been put aside for the reproduction of labor capacity. So my heart goes out to you, not in like an Elon Musk way, like a Nazi salute way, just like a usual my heart goes out to you kind of way, just like a normal thing, not an Elon Musk thing. So today, as the title suggests, the century of humiliation, China. We are going to be looking at the what is affectionately known or referred to by the Chinese as the century of humiliation. So the century of humiliation, we did a live stream yesterday and on Monday. So on Monday we looked at the Chinese Industrial Revolution because I think it's very important to actually get an understanding of the Industrial Revolution in China to like trying to understand global politics today. The geopolitical landscape is being defined by the showdown, the apparent showdown, if we're not in the showdown already, between America as the existing global hegemon and China, the rising superpower. And like America for a long time has been superpower number one, like kind of thing, and like undisputed world champion America, and like now China is obviously rising and like is set to take that mantle on like, different grounds, like economically, militarily, from in terms of technology, in terms of social organization. Is it going to pip the top dog, America? And so like we need to have a good understanding then of China. And like I think people have like unfortunately, if not like a completely propagandized view of China, then like a very select and curated view of China from like whatever they've done on their own in terms of their own research and understanding. Now, in saying all of that, we'd looked at the Industrial Revolution of China on Monday. So this is like part of a series now, a series of streams, I guess you would say. But yeah, we looked at the Industrial Revolution. We looked at two documentaries from the 1960s. So like kind of period pieces. We're looking at like, primary sources from a historical analysis sense. And we looked at yesterday a documentary on how the Chinese silver trade changed history. And we were making the connections that like kind of China was instrumental in proto-capitalism, so actually producing the capitalist mode of production. And that was their part in it, like on a very general and grand scale, their part in global capitalism was the fact that they had an insatiable lust for silver. And they came down to apparently some taxation policy that was done in like, I want to say like the 1680s, and it carried through for like a century of like intensive trade then between the Spanish and the Chinese. The Spanish having found silver in South America, and then were transporting that basically to the Chinese, and like they were getting all of the wealth from Chinese industriousness, and like I guess their artisan culture, all that sort of stuff. They were transporting that, and that gave them significant economic power in the West. but like that significant relationship and that need of China for silver and that availability for Spain to service that need started like a global, a let's call it a proto-globalized world network in terms of global trade. So we made the case basically that like China was as instrumental in the formation of capitalism as the Europeans like to think that they were, as Westerners like to think that they were. Um, and today we're going to be looking at the next step in that progress, which was then after the Chinese they closed themselves off after 100 years of this silver trading, and then they reopened up like 50 years after they closed off, roughly. So let's say in the I want to say the 1850s, they reopened China. But that doesn't sound right now. But like, let's go with like in the 1800s. Okay, so in the 19th century, they reopened kind of for business, and this is where the Europeans came back in. No, so that doesn't make sense then. It's like we're talking 1680s to 1780s, and then they did about it was like 50 years, let's say, they took off from trade. So the early 19th century they reopened to the world, but they allowed the Europeans to come in, but like in a select way. They opened up on the eastern seaboard just a little bit. There were like a handful of cities that they were opening to trade, one of them being Canton, and that Canton remained kind of the center for Europeans coming into China exclusively to trade. And so like they actually set up shop in these coastal areas. They weren't allowed to go anywhere else in China. They had to stay in the coastal areas. And like now we're going to see the next development of that phase of like China's interface with the global trade network. And this will be known, after the fact and by the Chinese as their century of humiliation. So from the early 18th century, then obviously until, I guess, the communist revolution under Mao. So anyway, that's where we were at. And like I'm reading The Grundrisse at the moment by Karl Marx, and he actually says something interesting about like proto-capitalism, which is like the string I was trying to draw, the bow I was trying to draw, sorry, yesterday. So he writes something interesting in like the development of capital, like as a mode of production. So capital doesn't, like somebody has to be the first to accumulate wealth and then put it into motion as capital, on the individual level as the capitalist. But like on the societal level, at a global economic sense, like it falls prey to the same thing. Okay, so I'm just going to read you an excerpt from the Grundrisse. So if you're wondering, this is the Penguin Classics edition of Karl Marx's The Grundrisse, and we are on page 459, just in case anyone wants to reference it. Not that anyone's actually watching the stream at the moment. Interesting. All right, so let's go with this. Precisely as such, historic presuppositions are past and gone, and hence belong to the history of its formation, but in no way to its contemporary history. So there are presuppositions to a historical mode or a historical time that don't enter into that moment in history anymore. All right, so just hold that idea. It'll make sense in a second. But in no way to its contemporary history, i.e. not the real system of the mode of production ruled by it, while e.g. the flight of serfs to cities is one of the historic conditions and presuppositions of urbanism. It is not a condition, not a moment of the reality of developed cities, but belongs rather to their past presuppositions, to the presuppositions of their becoming, which are suspended in their being. And this is an important concept. So, the flight of serfs to the cities creates an urban environment, but you don't need the flight of the serfs to constitute a developed city or a developed urban area. That is a presupposition. That is something that happens at one point in time. It is the act of becoming. There's an integral component, and then that becomes suspended in the being. So you become something. There is a transitional period of becoming, and then that is suspended in the being. So like this is really important, because yesterday, like I said in the stream, we were talking about this idea of proto capitalism, and like there was a distinction potentially we were making between proto-capitalism and actual capitalism, and then like it was kind of gray area whether this actually constitutes capitalism or not, even though all the traits were there. And like you're setting up a global market, and you're setting up a societies that are built to like wholly and dependently on trade, but like there's not really wage labor forces at this point, even though there was lots of slaved and forced labor happening. However, like he clearly points out here, which I think is important, is that the presuppositions of something's becoming are suspended in the being. So like you can have a transitionary time of becoming to allow you to get to a new mode of production like capitalism, let's say. And like that doesn't mean that becoming period, the presuppositions are any less important. They're just not necessary anymore. They're not existent anymore. The conditions and presuppositions of the becoming, of the arising of capital, presuppose precisely that it is not yet in being but merely becoming. They therefore disappear as real capital arises, capital which itself, on the basis of its own reality, posits or create the conditions for its realization. So once capital becomes capital and capitalism becomes a mode of production, let's say the capitalist mode of production, it no longer needs this period of becoming, which is this proto-capitalist period we were talking about yesterday, which was starting in the 1600s, basically from the time when Spain was starting to trade with China in terms of massive amounts of silver. Thus, e.g., while the process in which money or value for itself originally becomes capital presupposes on the part of the capitalist an accumulation, perhaps by means of savings garnered from products and values created by his own labor, etc., which he has undertaken as not capitalist, i.e., while the presuppositions under which money becomes capital appear as given, external presuppositions of the arising of capital. As soon as capital has become capital as such, it creates its own presuppositions. So like, in a really roundabout, in a long-winded way, what he's really talking about here is, like, as I was pointing out before, that there is a transitional period of becoming, but that is still integral to the mode of production. So the becoming of capitalism was like this interaction between China and Spain. And like Spain was colonizing South America and had its tentacles kind of all over the place in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East. And they were using their colonial network to supply silver to China. And China had changed its taxation policy, so it required all of this silver. And that sparked this global trade network and this enormous transfer of wealth between the Spanish cultures, the Spanish culture and the Chinese culture, like mediated through Manila, actually, which is interesting. So the Philippines, which is an integral colony as well of Spain, or will become basically a Spanish territory, then assumed by the Americans. But like, I don't think there's any real doubt that this period can be constituted as a capitalist period now, in the sense that it is capitalism, or a mode of capitalist production becoming itself. And like, if we know now that things in a transitional period and become themselves. You could even argue, which we were trying to discuss yesterday in the stream as well, you could even argue that, socialism is, or yeah, socialism as a transition between capitalism to communism is in its transitional phase at the moment. Like we've had socialist experiments, as you would call them, people that have dabbled with socialist styles of government in the face of the capitalist mode of production. So that would be like, obviously the USSR and China under Mao, and maybe Cuba, and Venezuela, I guess, Vietnam. These are all type of workers' revolutions that have brought in kind of one-party systems, but they're anti-capitalist, and so like they're kind of proto-socialist, and moving in that transitional period. So like I think it's important to recognize that. Now we're going to go further into like Chinese history now to discover this very particular point in time where colonialism becomes a big issue for China, and this is the century of humiliation. So we're going to be doing that by looking at this, or continuing from this documentary series that we were looking at just yesterday on Twitch. And like I said, this one is called The Opium Wars, how the Chinese silver trade changed history, empires of silver, and it's by Absolute History, apparently. So let's go back to the start of this segment of the documentary. And like, if you have any questions or anything like that, just let me know and stop me, say hi in the chat, and we can have a conversation.
It's here, in a tiny settlement, high in the Andes mountain range of South America, that global trade begins. And that's because of what is discovered deep inside this mountain.
Silver.
The purest silver the world has ever seen. It's 1581, and a buyer appears for this silver. 11,000 miles away, the Emperor of China, the most powerful man on earth, has decided that his people must now pay their tax in silver.
This sparks a huge demand for silver in China, to the point where silver was worth more than gold.
So I
This
was
series explores
off.
how the world is transformed.
I was off by 100 years before. Okay, it's 1581. Then to 16, to the late 1600s, that they opened themselves up to Spain to allow silver to come in. And then that pushes everything else back. So then they're out for about 50 years, and then they open themselves up for Europeans to come back in and trade by the mid-1700s. I guess that makes a lot more sense now.
When the King of Spain's silver meets the tax demands of the Emperor of China. It's a remarkable story that witnesses how China came to dominate at the dawn of world trade over 400 years ago.
The first time the whole world was linked into one global network, and the most important element of this is silver.
Silver allows China's emperors to become the most powerful men on earth, and silver makes this businessman the richest man in the world.
A lot of America's Industrial Revolution was funded by this Chinese merchant.
Chinese craftsmen go on to create silverware of unparalleled skill and beauty that are coveted across the world.
Already in the 18th century, people were admiring this fantastic work because the wire is so thin, it's like hair.
China's silver trade drives the growth of world cities from Boston to Hong Kong, Shanghai to Seville. But it also sows the
I'm getting a lot of delay coming in, and I don't know why that is. So I'm just going to do some technical stuff. Fix my camera. This is really annoying. All right. I think I've fixed the delay now. I hope. Okay, let's get back to it. No, still a bit delayed. No, I think it's okay. All right, let's get back to it. Please, if you've joined and you want to know what the hell's going on, just reach out in the chat. We're looking at the century of humiliation, affectionately coined by the Chinese for a period in which the Europeans came in through their colonial networks and kind of did a lot of damage in China. And really like knocked them off from their high point as being a society that has always kind of more or less been in control and dictated their own kind of policy, internal and foreign. So let's get back to the documentary.
Seeds of China's near destruction and leads to war with Western powers.
The British were determined to get a war. They got the war.
It's the time when China enters what's become nicknamed the Century of Humiliation, the period when China was not in control of its own external affairs.
But China won't let go its
Over 2 million Australians have trust.
obsession with this precious metal.
Only trust.
But China won't let go its obsession with this precious metal.
Only trust silver. It is almost like a religion in Chinese history. Silver is our gold in Chinese history.
This series reveals how silver changes China's history and the history of the world.
It's like holding a piece of history on your hand.
The skyline of Shanghai is one of the defining views of modern China. It is testament to the last 40 years in which China has undergone a meteoric rise to become the second largest economy on the planet. Soon, it will be number one. But to have China at the very center of world trade is nothing new. 250 years ago, in the 18th century, China is the greatest economic and cultural empire in the world, ruled over by one of its most celebrated emperors, Qianlu.
Qianlong displayed his wealth. He built palaces. Qianlong was no doubt fully convinced he was one of the wealthiest men living on earth at his time.
China occupies this position of dominance in global trade because all the world loves China's porcelain and silks. And it pays handsomely for these luxury goods in the only commodity that China wants, silver. China has been deeply dependent on silver ever since the 16th century, when the emperor decides to tax his people in silver. But China has little silver of its own, so must import it. This appears to be the perfect combination of supply and demand, particularly at the end of the 18th century, because of a unique commodity China controls, and one that the rest of the world demands above all else.
China had tea. Nowhere else in the world, as it was known at the time, produced tea. Tea takes hold quite rapidly. It's an addictive drug.
Britain imports more tea from China than any other European country. 80% of all tea exports from the port of Canton are shipped to Britain, and the right to import all this tea is held by one remarkable organization, the British East India Company.
They were much more than the name suggests, not just a company, but actually a whole semi-governmental organization in their own right.
Yep.
By the end of the 18th century, the East India Company boasts a private army of almost 90,000 men, as well as a fleet of heavily gunned warships. It has taken control over a large part of India at the expense of the Mughal emperors. But despite the colossal business in tea, there is a big problem at the heart of all Britain's trade with China.
British merchants needed to try and find goods which would sell. They had cottons, they had wools, they tried everything they could, but it was very difficult to find a good which would significantly take in a Chinese market.
The demand for tea is so great that the British have no choice but to comply with China.
Silver was being essentially leaked out of the coffers of the East India Company as it sought to find products that it could trade successfully with China. So the advantage was essentially with China at that stage.
The East India Company convinces the British government to act.
Like the correlations between, like, you know, how the world works now is still really uncanny, and which is what kind of, you could argue, makes this a form, an earlier stage of the capitalist mode of production, is like the way that like global money and currency works on a global trade. And so like you see China, their people need silver to trade with China. Okay, and like everyone wants like Chinese goods, but like they want to have some type of relation with China. Like the English are trying to find something that like the Chinese want, so like they don't have to just continually feed and get silver in order to get access to China. Now, this is exactly what happens at the moment in global trade after the Bretton Woods system. So after World War II, and like the Americans basically guaranteed world trade by pegging the US dollar to gold, and then everyone else pegged themselves to yo, what's up, give up the rack. How you going? YouTube is giving me like a warning saying that like the footage is not great. So like just let me know if this is like dropping out or something like that, please. Good old Bretton Woods. Yes, good old Bretton Woods. So like the system was almost identical, I would say, for IS in terms of like, yeah, the Bretton Woods system was set up and like everyone trades in US dollars essentially because everyone pegged themselves to the US dollar, and the US dollar was a stable currency because it was backed by gold, so you didn't have all this weird fluctuation and this stuff like going on. And so like dollars were able, like currencies around the world were able to stabilize and ensure global trade, but like they didn't have inflationary problems. But I'm good now. Okay, sweet. Oh yeah, YouTube keeps giving me warnings. Naughty. But like, yeah, this is like kind of like China was the center point, and everyone wanted to get stuff off China, and they controlled like kind of that trade. And so like if anyone wanted Eastern goods or Chinese goods, they had to be able to deal in that currency, the predominant currency being silver. And so yeah, now you have the US dollar, and like if you really want to do global trade, you have to have access to the US dollar somehow, because that's how most nations do things. They have US reserves, US dollar reserves, and like in order, and that's just not to like kind of protect themselves in times of uncertainty, but like also, like I said, to be able to trade with anyone, not just the Americans though. That's the beauty of like this post-war Bretton Woods system leftover, is that like even people that aren't American trading with one another, if they really want to be able to do things and settle exchanges, they need US dollars. So yeah, it would seem that like by de facto silver has become the global currency because of the needs of China. And like it's the Americans, like by default the US dollar is still the global currency, and that's because of the needs of the Americans. Everybody finances American debt basically. So America is in massive debt, and like the rest of the world pays for it because they need American dollars. It is like one of the most unique financial tricks in the history of finance, like, and that's the entirety of the human race's finance history I'm talking about here. Like the Chinese had to they just wanted silver. I don't know if there was much more trickery in it than that, but like the way that the Americans have set up dependence on the US dollar in global trade is pretty amazing. It's, yeah, like I said, it's one of the greatest magic tricks ever. So like, yeah, it's very interesting. So like another reason to add to the theory that this isn't this is a stage of capitalism. It's not industrial capitalism, which is the most famous stage, I would say, of capitalists. The cliched look of everybody, working in industrial warehouses and factories, and capitalists with top hats and canes and stuff like that. This is kind of a precursor to that. This is colonial capitalism. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
In 1792, Britain launches an enormous trade mission to China. It's a massive undertaking. At its head is the statesman. An enormous trade mission to China. It's a massive undertaking. At its head is the statesman and diplomat
1792. So like this is like well after the American Revolution or the American War of Independence and all that sort of stuff. So like they don't get down with China, the British, till well after the Americans are independent. It's very interesting.
Macartney is expected to hammer out better terms of trade with the most powerful nation on earth.
What was that
To hammer
nefarious
at its
guy's
head
name again?
is the statesman and diplomat, Lord George Macartney. Macartney is expected to hammer out better terms of trade with the most powerful nation on earth. The British Library holds the letter from the Home Secretary that spells out the main problem Macartney has to solve.
You should fairly state, after repeating the general assurances of His Majesty's friendly and pacific inclinations towards the Emperor, and his mutual benefits to be derived from a trade between the two nations, in the course of which we receive, besides other articles, to the amount of 20 millions of pounds weight of a Chinese herb.
So instead of paying for all this tea with silver bullion, the British must persuade Emperor Qianglong to buy British goods in return. But British ambitions extend way beyond increased sales. Macartney is told he must convince the Emperor to provide the British with a trading base, a piece of China itself. We wish to obtain a grant of a small tract of ground or detached island. We desire neither fortification nor defense, but only the protection of the Chinese government for our merchants and or their agents in trading or traveling through the country.
They were quite optimistic when they sent this embassy off that they might achieve something of the sort.
There is good reason for British optimism. It is the first nation in the world to industrialize, and as a result, its military and economic power is growing. Britain considers itself an equal to any nation in the world, even China. In September 1792, Lord Macartney, along with 700 soldiers and servants, departs for China on a flotilla of 3 ships.
They sail with interpreters, musicians, they sail with a band. They have a large number of very ornate presents, sing-songs, musical clocks, all sorts of things for the emperor. But they have a clear target in terms of their requests. And at the heart of it, they want the British state to be recognized by the Chinese, a permanent embassy to be allowed to reside at the court in Beijing.
Isn't that interesting, right? Like this, again, this historical materialist standpoint of like looking at the way that history develops. It's all about like economics and stuff like that. And like the only reason that you have embassies to begin with, like now it's kind of like, you know, geopolitics and sorting out like, you know, naughty people that do the wrong thing and disputes between nations. But like embassies are really established because you've got a trading interest in a country, and you need to have a mouthpiece in court of the most powerful people within that nation or that country or within that culture. And so you set up an embassy so you can have like a mouthpiece and an ear in their court, and then they can relay information back to the trading post, etc., etc. It's really, that's all it's got to do with like politics and economy. Like, and like at this time, you know, it was referred to politics and the economy was referred to political economy, because you don't separate economics from politics. It's a very later stage capital bourgeois notion that the economy works differently to the political scene. There really is no separation from economics and politics at all. They are basically the same, like they're just a different word for the exact same thing.
When Lord Macartney arrives in China in July 1793, he's expecting to meet the Emperor, but the Emperor is nowhere to be seen at the Forbidden City. Qianglong has moved his court 200 miles north beyond China's Great Wall to his summer residence at Chengde. After almost a year since he set sail from England, Macartney still must wait before being allowed to meet with the most powerful man on earth.
The Qianlong Emperor has at this point been on the throne for nearly 50 years. He's in his 80s. He is one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history from start to finish. He's been expanding China into Central Asia, tremendously successful wars. So he is extremely proud of his own achievements.
当时马格尔尼他所来的这样一个，当时是以祝寿的名义给乾隆皇帝80。
This is Australia. Jeez. Boo ads. Boo.
所以最初的时候，当时是以祝寿的名义给乾隆皇帝80大寿祝寿的名义，所以最初的时候，当乾隆皇帝知道是这样子的时候，觉得是大清帝国威名远播，所以很远的地方的外国人也来向乾隆皇帝祝寿进贡等等。
McCartney is asked to join the queue of ambassadors from the distant borders of Jianglun's vast empire. Jianglun receives tribute from each ambassador in turn, not in a palace, but in a tent.
我们现在所在的地方叫做万树园，万树园，所以你可以看到它是有很多树在这儿，但是却并没有建筑。所以当时乾隆皇帝接见马格尔尼的时候，也是没有建筑，而是在蒙古包，就像在我背后这样的蒙古包里面接见他的，没有宫殿在这里。
On meeting Jianglun, all ambassadors are expected to kneel and press their head 9 times to the floor. McCartney, however, refuses. So instead of performing the traditional kowtow, he drops on one knee before presenting his gifts.
So this is one of a large set of sketches by William Alexander, who was the junior artist for the embassy. And one of the things he drew was this planetarium, which was the grandest and most spectacular gift, because they had thought from reading the Jesuit missionary accounts of China that the Chinese court was exceptionally interested in astronomy.
But the most significant gift is a solid gold box encrusted with diamonds, containing a letter from the British King George III, laying out his hopes for the trade mission.
Interesting. Eh? Better would approve? No, she wouldn't actually. She really wants to see. She wants to see Australian ads. This is where it gets interesting, right? Planetarium. Yeah, I know, right? How interesting is that? They know that the Chinese love their astrology, so bring them a planetarium. But like, how interesting is that for your trade relations, eh? Being like, all right, everyone that comes in here bows to the emperor, touches the ground 9 times, but like, I'll drop a knee and give some gifts. Like, it's risky play, that is. It's a real power play, that is. It's just like, look, buddy, we are equals here. I come from a different state. We're not subjugated by China, so I'm not just here to just to pay homage and say happy birthday. No, 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 no. This time, it's business. That's like, yeah, very colonial, very British. All of a sudden, we got 6 people in the stream. I've only got one person that said hello. Don't be rude. Say hello. Let me know why you're watching. We're going through the century of humiliation in Chinese history, okay? So like we've spent like 3 streams now trying to understand like a bit of the development of history and like the development of Chinese history and their kind of contribution, let's say, to capitalism, the capitalist mode of production. And like, as we have been learning for the last few days, like the Chinese, you could almost blame them for capitalism. Okay, you could almost blame them for global capitalism and the rise of capitalism as a mode of production. It's nothing personal, it's just good business. Pixel Media, hello. Welcome to the stream. But like, very much heavily going against this idea that like, you know, capitalism is this like European invention. Capitalism was a semi-global event seems to be started largely because of the need for silver by the Chinese and the ability to fulfill that need by the Spanish, actually. And this like intricate relation between Asia and Europe is what kick-started the accumulation of capital on almost a primitive sense, as well as like general colonialization outside of that, which allows the accumulation of enough capital to kickstart a full-blown new mode of production, being a capitalist mode of production, which is huge and very significant to global history, and like looking at capitalism as a totality, as an entire planetary network of exchange. And so like we're up to this point where like China is going to lose basically its autonomy and will become kind of subordinate to colonial empires from Europe and Japan, and then subsequently America as well. the newly founded America at this time. That's where we're at, if you're wondering. So thank you for saying hi. And anyone else who's watching, you know, and if you have access, you're not just lurking in the background listening, but you actually can say hi. And if we have any questions or comments as we go, just drop it in the chat and we can have a chat. But like, you know, I really wanted to get across kind of this idea of this century of humiliation, like properly, because like it's integral to Chinese history. And like I said earlier, it's integral to geopolitics today, because like you could understand exactly, you could define quite well the rivalry that will happen between China and America here in the 21st century. And all the, you know, the hype and the scare about World War III by understanding China from the viewpoint of the century of humiliation. Like, let's see what the Chinese think of Europeans, Westerners, the Japanese and stuff like that, following on from, like I said, this, the century of humiliation. And that's what we're learning about at the moment. We will buy them a planetarium. That's a reference to South Park. And like, you know what? I'm going to pay that for, I guess. And we're going to find that South Park. Planet area. There it is.
Hello, children. My name is Dr. Adams. Welcome to the planetarium.
I thought it was planetarium.
Well, it is, but I have a bone disease which impedes my ability to pronounce the T in planetarium.
That's a pretty weird bone disease.
Yes, perhaps someday I can get a bone marrow transplant.
What the fuck? So random. But yeah, South Park has lost that charm, I think. Anyway. So the British have come through an ambassador. This is where we're at the moment, if you're wondering. The British have come with an ambassador to meet the Emperor of China, who's been sitting on the throne now for like 50 years. He's in his 80s. He doesn't really give a shit because he expanded the Chinese empire so much and he thinks he's like basically rules the world. And they're superpower number one, at least in their own right, or own mind, the Chinese. And like here we have superpower number one in their own mind, the British. They're going through the Industrial Revolution now, arguably. You know, kicks off in kind of 1770, and like, what are we in the 1790s now? So like they're 20 years into their Industrial Revolution. They're sitting on top of the world as much as they think the English. And so we've got a situation like we've got right now in the 21st century. We've got English, Western superpower number one coming to tell China that like, it's enough. We're not trading you. We're not buying your goods anymore with silver and just making you rich with silver. We're going to come and we're going to trade. So you want British goods as much as we will take on your Chinese goods. And so like we're about to find out if the Emperor Qing, I think it is going to tell them to get fucked or not, and whether or not this English ambassador, McCartney, I think his name is, McCarthy or McCartney, is going to pull off a pretty risky like style of negotiation. He's walked in to the emperor, telling him that he's going to say happy birthday. Everyone else is kissing the floor, which is, you know, usual etiquette. Kiss the floor 9 times when you see the emperor. And this guy's just like dropped one knee and said, hey, I'm actually not here to say happy birthday to you. Let's talk business. So like, let's see how that goes down, shall we?
那准备就为了这一刻，但是据说乾隆皇帝那么看都没有看，就是把这个盒子就放在一边了，因为当时因为双方的目的不一样，那么乾隆皇帝觉得你是来祝寿的，那么你见到我一眼，那这就是我的一个开恩了，你的目的就已经达到了。
But before...
So like he put the letter down basically and said like, well, you've seen me. That's all you get.
McCartney and his retinue are ushered out. Qing indulges in some polite conversation that throws the spotlight on the precocious young son of the British vice envoy, who on the long voyage has learned Mandarin.
当时见了乾隆皇帝的时候，乾隆皇帝也问你们中间有谁可以讲中文的吗？然后这个小男孩就被推举出来了，然后乾隆皇帝就让他过来，在乾隆皇帝的身边，然后跟他交流了几句，然后乾隆皇帝觉得很喜欢这个小孩子，并且还把自己身上的一个荷包解下来送给这个小男孩了。
But this charming coda to the
That's interesting. So, like, one of the kids in the English entourage learnt Mandarin, and so the emperor had a chat to him about it and gave him a little gift, little pouch with something in it.
embassy has little bearing on the outcome. The letter from George III to Qianlong is translated, and the Chinese emperor's reply is extremely dismissive.
And there's a sentence which is tremendously famous. The productions of our empire are manifold and in great abundance, nor do we stand in the least need of the produce of other countries.
Ha!
The embassy is a complete and utter failure. The Qing are not ready to accord these Britons the status of equals. The Qianlong emperor is not just emperor of the Qing Empire, he is the son of heaven. This King George III, who McCartney represents, is in fact, within Qianlong's vision of the world, a subordinate king.
Unfortunately, emperors of Qing Dynasty later on became too confident. Qianlong
You are my best friend and we've got some things to do.
So you know what's funny about these ads, right? I'll tell you here's something for a conspiracy theory. I did this on Twitch yesterday, and we're like picking up the exact same documentary, and I didn't get one ad while we were doing the stream on Twitch. So like, what's going on there? Hey? What's going on there? I'll leave that conspiracy theory with you, viewers, and you tell me your thoughts on that. Yeah, boo ads.
Many great emperors in Chinese history, he was the king. He was the emperor of the whole world.
Qianlong rejects all of the British requests. Worse still, he issues a stark warning to George III that he will use force if British ships try and trade anywhere other than Canton, the one port in China open to them.
The mission is effectively packed off back to where it came from. It goes back overland. And Qianlong issues instructions that all the way south, Qing military units are to assemble in view of the embassy to impress upon the British that the Qing has great military strength and could deal with them.
Hey, bit of flexing.
I think everybody who looks at this now realizes that the Qianlong emperor and his senior advisors, these people were not stupid. They had a very limited knowledge of what was going on in European politics at this time, but they were canny political operators, and that they were aware that the British had a heavily armed warship on the coast, and that they wanted
Bobette. Much love to the great Chinese culture. Much love and respect from Canada. All the way from Canada. Hello, good to hear you again. I have not been for a while. Not been able to join for some time. Nice to see you, Mary Ellen. Thank you for joining us. If people are wondering what we're doing, we're going through and understanding the century of humiliation, which was a point at which China has succumbed basically to European colonialism and Japanese colonialism as a result of them becoming industrial powers. And up until this point, like we've looked now from kind of the 1600s basically onwards to this point, and we're at the late 1700s now, almost coming into the 19th century. And like the English have tried to kind of set up relations on their terms with the Chinese and said, we want to just trade with you, not just like buy your products and you take all of our silver. We want you to start buying our goods as well. You know, that real good liberal ideal, classical liberal ideal of like, you know, exchange between two parties. The Chinese aren't interested. As far as they're concerned, they're superpower number one and they control the world. And like we're looking at these comparisons between what is happening now on the global stage, which is like China v America, and at the moment we're looking at China v England as like, you know, the Chinese think they're superpower number one. England at this point, you know, they think they're superpower number one, and like, you know, they're gonna be pretty soon. And we have this exact dichotomy going on right now on the world stage with America's superpower number one and the Chinese kind of basically dominating in economic relations and rising. And like the Americans are kind of trying to fight off the Chinese, and like, you know, how will that story unfold? Will the Americans be pipped at the end by the Chinese? Will they become the dominant economic power and superpower? And like I know this documentary, it's very controversial, but if you have time, go and check. It's free. Europa, The Last Battle. Okay, thank you very much for the suggestion. .net. Thank you very much. I will have to check it out. I'm assuming it's got to do with all of this, what we're talking about. But like we're making the case, and like we've been doing this now in the last few streams, that like, you know, capitalism is not just a result kind of European tendencies for trade and all that sort of stuff. Well, 12 hours, goddamn. It's not just a tendency for Europeans to want to trade and then that opened up to the world, but like, you know, China was almost instrumental and very significant in the development of capitalism because of its insatiable need and lust for silver. And that was like, you know, kind of satiated, let's say, to a large extent by the Spanish, and then that relationship kept going for a long time, etc., etc. And like China has been, yes, like I said, instrumental in the development of the capitalist mode of production beyond any type of European-centric view of like what capitalism might be. China has always been there, and it's this kind of century of humiliation that they dipped into, and then they're going to come back out of that once they learn how to play capitalism properly and industrialize. And now, you know, in Chinese fashion, they are back knocking at the door of superpower number one again. This was like a blip on the radar for them, a blemish in their grand history, and they want back in the world order. And they're going to establish their own world order by the sounds of it. And they're working on that right now with BRICS, etc. That's why it's so important to understand the Chinese history. And like, if they see this time as a point of humiliation, like, what does that mean for geopolitics today? Like you can understand a lot from their mindset about like what their intentions are with all of this, you know, fear of like World War III and like et cetera, that is being propagated by the mainstream media. Like, you can get a good understanding of their mindset potentially if you understand how they view this very sordid history and how they view their position in terms of global capitalism. For a long time, all we've really known is that, like, you know, China's been important for global capitalism for a neoliberal sense. Like, once they opened themselves up to the free market in the 1970s, hey, that's when they were important, because like global capitalism used China as its like kind of industrial warehouse and its factory warehouse system since the 70s onwards for like the last, you know, 50, 60 years. But like, China was integral to capitalism way before that, and they were actually the biggest player almost in the capitalist world market for a number of reasons. Like, people wanted their porcelain, people wanted their silks, everyone wanted their tea. Like, hence the famous line, you know, all the tea in China. And I will just get out another reference for you that I love and I keep thinking about ever since we watched the documentary yesterday. God, I hope it's here. I hope someone's clipped it. Oh, yes, they have.
I'll take it. Hello, China. I have something you may want, but it's going to cost you. That's right. All the tea.
I love it. I didn't understand this Family Guy joke until, like, you know, understanding the significance of the tea trade. Like, basically, the value creation that happened from tea trading around the world produced a lot of value on the European continent as well. Not just on the Western side, but on the Eastern side of the European continent. The Russians got incredibly wealthy from the tea trade, and like developed a lot of their capital holdings, which then allowed like kind of this capitalist mode of production to really develop. I'm so glad you saw that 4IS. I'm just going to play it one more time. Free to bet. I'll take it. It's a good joke.
I'll take it. Hello, China. I have something you may want, but it's gonna cost you.
That's right.
That's right. All the tea.
So yeah, all the tea in China just shows you like tea was up there in terms of a global commodity, up there with like oil. Okay, so like tea was oil back in the day. It was cotton. It was like, you know, whatever large scale commodity that you want to talk about. That's the type of dominance that the Chinese had on the global market, and like instrumental in this proto-capitalist kind of stage in history. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at the moment. I've got a few people saying hi in the chat. So if you are in the chat or if you're watching at home wondering what's going on, say hi. If you've got any comments, let us know. Opium War was something too. When we're going to get to the Opium War. I'm pretty sure that's where this documentary is going. So let's, like, it is called Opium Wars, but like they haven't gotten to that point yet. So, you know, we're about to find out what it is the British intend on dumping on the Chinese and screwing them over. And it's quite nefarious if you think about it like that. Like the English want to weigh into the Chinese market. And it's just like, you know, how else do you get Chinese to want some goods, right? Hey. Like drugs, trafficking drugs.
To refuse that the British had a heavily armed warship on the coast, and that they wanted to refuse the unacceptable requests of the British and get rid of them without causing trouble.
Qiang Long has maintained the status quo. His show of strength is designed to deter British aggression, and for now, he's come out on top. McCartney returns home empty-handed and belittled. Back in Britain, the public now view China as despotic and backward, and its ruler disparaged and mocked in popular cartoons.
See, despotic. See, this is the liberal. They're talking about like dog whistles today. Like the right has the dog whistle of like wokeism or something like that, right? The wokeism of the like classical liberals, people that like, you know, just think that free markets exist to bring peace and prosperity to everyone, and like anyone who gets in the way of free trade and all that type of stuff is like some type of tyrant that like needs to be dealt with. This is it right here. You can see it in like cartoon form. These liberals, these classical liberals, okay, they want to basically knock down the barriers of China, and they want to get in there and trade. They basically want to dominate and profit off China. But like, you know, they're going to say it's in the name of free trade, and free exchange between equals and individuals. And so like this is the liberal calling card here. It's against tyrants and against despotic regimes. And like that's still a liberal calling card today. Like when you talk about like when, you know, the Americans wanted to go in and like destroy like Iraq, they used kind of dictator and tyrant and all that sort of stuff. That's the language that liberals use. When these liberals wanted to get into China, they call them despots and stuff like that. When the Americans wanted to get their independence because they wanted to profit off their own industry and not have to like pay fealty to King George or anything like that, they call him a tyrant. It's all framing, yes. And tyrant, despot, dictator, whatever you want to call it, is a liberal dog whistle to allow free market systems to thrive, basically allowing corporations to profit. Like this isn't free trade to allow the English people to be more wealthy generally. This is free trade to allow the East India Company to come in and wreak havoc in China, basically. That's exactly what we're talking about here. A license to wreak absolute havoc and profit off misery and despair, basically. Yep. The Noodle Cat. Short and sweet. I like it. Welcome, the Noodle Cat. I must admit, there are some people in here that I have not seen in this stream before. So if that is you, if you are new to this stream, welcome. Welcome. And yeah, thanks for joining the ride. I hope you have some context as to what we're doing. And I will do some promo soon in terms of like, you know, joining the Discord server so you can get involved with chats and all that sort of stuff. So you can continue the conversation with us outside of streams. Just found you do. Well, it's nice for you to say hi in the chat. I do appreciate that. And if you want some context as to why we're looking at this type of history, let me know. Plug it, MysterE. All right, fine. I know 4AS will be upset with me if I don't plug it. So I'm just going to plug it now. We have, if you like the stream, we have a Discord server, so you can continue these types of chats when we're not online, etc., etc. So I just invited someone to have a look, but I watch on TV and the chat on the phone, so I'm 2 people. Okay, that makes sense then. Thank you. Thank you. 2 for the price of 1. Yeah, I know, right? And my stream is laggy as hell at the moment. I don't know what's going on there, but let me just put the Discord in before I get in trouble. About this channel, you invite, copy. Okay, let me put that in the chat. So this is the Discord server if you're interested in continuing these types of discussions outside of the stream. So let's continue with what's going to happen here between the British and the Chinese. I think we know
There's
the
a
answer.
big shift
but, you know.
from enthusiastic sinophilia, one might say, intellectually, a love or an interest in China, an appreciation of what seems to be an idealized China, to first-hand reports from Britons who've been there who say, it's nothing like that at all. In fact, as McCartney put it, it's an old first-rate man of war. It's heading for the breaker's yard. And if we can help it along, that will change things.
Wow, talk about that. You're right. It's all about framing for AS. All about framing. Actually, they're not such an advanced culture. They're not doing that well, the old Chinese. They actually need a bit of good old British help. Let's get in there and we'll trade with them and they'll be better off for it in the long term. Let's open ourselves up so we can plunder them, but it's actually for their betterment. And that's a real colonial mindset right there. The colonizer coming to civilize the people that they're going to absolutely dominate and exploit.
Despite being stung by Jiang Lun's rebuttal, Britain has no option but to accept the terms of trade laid down by China. And at the dawn of the 19th century, there are still vast fortunes to be made from China in the most vital trade hub on the planet, Canton. All the tea in China, along with its silks and porcelains...
All the tea in China, there it is. Family Guy.
...shipped out of Canton, and into Canton flows the world's silver to pay for these goods.
呢一條嘅珠江嘅航道咧，就係當日中國吸納外面嘅白銀嘅最主要嘅，亦都唯一合法嘅航道。咁所以呢一個咧係個白銀嗰個嘅航道嚟嘅。
Trade with the West makes Canton, this small and remote part of China's massive empire, one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world. This is the golden age of Canton.
It was the nexus of global trade.
Look at that. French, American, British, what is that, Dutch? All the European powers or the Western powers here chilling in Canton, and they've described it as a cosmopolitan area. This is what, the liberal world does. It makes everyone kind of multicultural, they live together, but all under the auspices of beautiful trade and free exchange. That's a good quote. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that for all the tea in China. Yeah, and what a quote. It'd be like saying today, for all the oil in the Arab Emirates or something like that. Or all the data on Facebook. Golden age of lie and steal without consequences. Yeah, well, far out. Yeah, plunder. Yeah, it's unlike the neoliberal style of plundering and stuff. 1,100%. That is a good affirmation right there. 1,100%.
You have people wearing different costumes, speaking different languages, dealing with goods from all over the world. Of course, some of them are more prominent than others. Tea, silver, but it was actually quite a vibrant city that people would flock to because that was where they could pursue.
Oh my God.
Over 2 million Australians have trusted instant.
Jesus.
Their business. Quite a vibrant city that people would flock to because that was where they could pursue their business.
Canton is not only where goods are exchanged, but where they are made. This city becomes a workshop of the world, where thousands of low-paid but highly skilled craftsmen are producing Chinese goods
Low paid but highly skilled craftsmen, producing industriously for the profit of others. Hey, if this is still proto-capitalism, fine. But if this sounds like full-blown capital relations here, like full-blown capital relations, the neoliberal plundering has to do with debt and austerity. Yes, and privatizing common assets. I think David Harvey calls it some form of dispossession, if I recall correctly, 4IS. I think you know what I'm talking about.
For lucrative foreign markets.
Look at that. Look at that artwork.
We have to bear in mind that for late 18th century, Europe could not produce its own very fine porcelains, and they have to rely on China. Canton, being the only port which could conduct China trade, also enjoyed the advantage of setting up various manufacturers and workshops for painting these kinds.
Well, did I just get kicked off? They just killed the stream. What? What the? Can you guys hear me? I think I'm back. Okay, so I just got a warning come up on my end. And it was basically along the lines of, I've had a copyright breach or something like that. But yeah, I probably said the C word. Somebody said censor. And we've been censored. Ah, oh my God. Watch out for the tech bros, everyone. I screenshotted the message. Ah, this is funny. All right. Look. Well, like, this is the thing, okay? We used this exact same video for like 2 hours yesterday. I wish, what's his name? Is it Super Anonymous or Anonymous Super, who was in the stream with me yesterday? Like, we watched 2 hours of a documentary yesterday on Twitch. Not a fucking problem. No ads either, might I add. And then, like, today, YouTube's cracking down on us using the exact same documentary. This is very interesting. I guess we've used too much of it. I need to break it up. Apparently, you need to chat more when you live stream stuff. Yeah, you can't just watch it for too long. You need to speak a little bit. From using that video. Glad you're back, dude. Yeah, must have been that vid. The holders of capital are frowning upon you. See, this is my issue when it comes to intellectual property, okay? Like, we are viewing their stuff. We're giving views and, like, we're spreading the information that, like, you know, they have kindly provided. We're consuming their content, which is the intent of the production of this documentary, is to be consumed. It is consumed immediately after production. There's like zero wait time in terms of consumption. And like we could come back if everybody likes this. We might go back and check out Absolute History, the channel, and like want to consume more of their stuff. This is like free advertising, if nothing else. And here we are getting caught up in the copyright machine of some algorithm that is put together by the tech bros. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Like, we're doing what YouTube wants. YouTube wants people to be attached like zombies to their screens and on YouTube, and like all of us are attached to YouTube right now. We're all plugged into the fucking matrix, and so like, you know, whatever. It is fair use. Who said that? Noodle the cat. Best cat we've ever had in the stream. Remember when YouTube didn't have ads and all the capitalist chokeholds? Yeah, well, that really dates all of us, those who can remember when YouTube didn't have ads. Any excuse to silence critics. I'm going to rip their video. I'll show them. You're about to get censored, Noodle the cat. All right, I'm just going to continue with the video and pretend like nothing happened. And if we get caught again, then like so be it. We get caught. But like before I do that, I'm going to really quickly plug a couple of things. So I hope you don't mind me taking the time before we get torn apart from one another again to just do some shameless plugging. It's what I do these days to keep myself alive. Or someone got a message redacted. I can't even see what it is. Yeah, I can't actually see what the redacted message is. It must be bad. Badass. All right, so this is a plug for Patreon. Please go and become a member for free on Patreon. If you can financially support, by all means. But like, I can get notifications to people on Patreon so much better than any social media platform. It was your rip comment. It was. A few of mine were taken off before I mentioned the art of war. Yeah, see, the algorithm just goes nuts with censoring stuff. I don't think it doesn't understand context very well. So yeah, please go to the Patreon, become a member, and sign up for free, just so I can get notifications. Like I said, YouTube doesn't work like that. Notifications don't go very well on social media. It's all up to the algorithm. So please go and join. And then join the Discord too, so you can have chats with the rest of us about being censored on YouTube and being a bad kitty. And like saying things like the art of war, which is very, very naughty, apparently. So shall we do this? Like, can we just get a show of hands? Are we going to take the risk again and like dive back into this documentary and steal someone's intellectual property? I think we should just do it. This is a new video in itself. I guess it is technically, isn't it? Because I had to restart the stream. So let's do that. Let's see if we get picked up again by the algorithm. Deep breath, everyone. Let's go back to where we were in porcelain land.
I know porcelains. I think they will find it very surprised why the foreigners need such a large bowl. We use bowl to eat rice, right, and soup. And they will be told that, oh, this is punch bowl. Well, in terms of shape and function, it must sound very exotic.
Why do they need such a big bowl? So good. Yeah, why the hell? It's just for rice, isn't it? No, they want to have parties with this stuff. A punch bowl. So good. Don't tell Sun Tzu he's being censored. His book is not tolerated in 2025. Yeah, you can't say the art of war. There's so much for culture. That's the one thing about algorithms, right? They have absolutely no culture.
The Chinese. But in terms of the pictures and also the design and motifs, it must also look very exotic to the Westerners.
Canton is also home to a developing craft that would also take deep root abroad. Thousands of workshops are mass-producing silverware for foreign markets and for foreign tastes.
This is a period of time when virtually no one had a clear sense of what China looked like, and there was tremendous interest, fascination in Cathay, in this land that almost no one had seen. These are not depictions of China per se. They're mythical landscapes with mythical beasts. There are quite a lot of pagodas, boats, beautiful flowers, prunus, this fantastical dragon handle, something that would never be on a piece of London or Philadelphia silver. And that really is proclaiming this as something that was made in China by Chinese silversmiths.
Those Cantonese silversmiths are mass-producing highly crafted silverware, but they're also imitating and undercutting Western silversmiths.
You could have a Chinese silversmith make a spoon that was virtually identical to your familiar 19th century flatware for a fraction of the cost.
Well, well, well. Hey? Ah! I think we're getting done again. Yeah, I got censored again. Shit.
You are my best friend.
All right. I don't know what's going on with this one, but I haven't run into this problem before. So, yeah, I am a bit concerned about getting strikes and stuff like that because it does happen. So, like, I'm just gonna quickly look at that. Just bear with me. Like, this has not happened before. We've watched documentaries here and done things, and we've never run into this problem. I don't see there being any strikes on it. That's unfortunate, because, like, we were just getting to the crunch point. Like, seriously. We were just getting into the good part of that documentary as well. I don't see any strikes or anything. Just bear with me. I'm sorry about this. Damn. Well, I don't know if this constitutes a strike, but like whatever. It doesn't look like it. So like I've got another version of the same documentary, I think. It's from the same channel, so it's probably gonna get picked up again. But like yeah. I don't know if this is gonna get picked up or not. Like, let's see what happens. So disheartening. We're having such a good time. You're back. We can see you. Maybe save the docos for Twitch. Yeah, apparently. Far out. Well, this is, yeah, it's really killed it, hasn't it? We need a filter for the videos. Would that work? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If we can do that by proxy or something like that. So it doesn't get picked up. But I don't know how else to do that. Unless, say, we get rid of doing the streams through YouTube. That's the only thing. Like, Twitch seems to be fine. Twitch seems to be not a problem at all. Damn. All right, let's see how we go. I'll give it a one last chance. If we get done again, then we're going to have to just call it. And I'll have to go back to the drawing board on this one. Like, I guess I could move to Twitch, but, like, I don't know if that's going to be inconvenient for everyone. What if you're in front of the video playback? Would that defeat it? Like, my face, if I moved myself in front of it. Yeah, look, I'll try that. I don't know if you guys have a problem with that, though. Like, if I move my image in front of it. I don't use Twitch. Yeah, see, I don't want to just move for that. Yeah, let me move myself in front of the video. Man. This is fucked up, man. All right, let's try it. I'm going to move myself in front of the video. Let's see if we can outsmart the algorithm. Can't believe we had to play these games. Seriously. What is this? Let's see if we get done again, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone hold your breath. Don't hold it for too long, though.
The purest silver the world.
So where were we? Where were we? No, I don't think this is the right one. Damn, that sucks. Maybe this one. Leave us alone. Boo ads. Boo. No wrong with the no copyright claim against the ads though, is there? Eh? That's right. All the tea in China. I think we're around here.
Previous lives in what becomes known as the Golden Ghetto.
We know that they drank well and ate
Here we
well.
go, is the spoons.
The silver itself would have presumably been the same price, but the labor was infinitely less expensive. We think about...
Yeah, I guess I will make one. I'm a revolutionary appreciator, so... Yes, a revolutionary appreciator. I haven't had that one before. That's a good terminology, a good bit of terminology to use. I might steal that one in the future. Hope you don't mind. An appreciator of the revolution. Well, so far so good. We'll see how we go.
The mass production of goods in the 21st century and the fact that so many of these things are easily, are so inexpensive. And indeed, to some extent, the same thing is happening in the 21st century as was in the 19th.
See, that was just an admission of like the trajectory of capitalism. Like, you know, you can go somewhere else, get the labor done for much cheaper, sell the same product, and like realize the same profits in terms of like you can produce more of it, but like you're exploiting labor better now. And so you get more money back from that circulation process by cutting labor costs, as opposed to actually increasing the price of the commodity or anything like that. You're just squeezing labor more. And then she's talking about like in the 21st century, who cares about utensils because they're all made by machines now anyway. So the productivity of labor is huge and the amount of labor costs are so small. So you have really cheap goods, but you can still make your profit margins anyway. It's the, you know, that law of the falling rate of profit. And and like the rise in productivity versus a reduction in the need for labor.
Canton is dynamic. It's a hive of industry and commerce. And it's one of the vital crucibles where modern international trade is born. But it presents challenges to Western merchants.
Finding the right commodities to trade, figuring what language to speak, figuring out what currency to trade in, that's all quite no small feat for the early part of the 19th century, when there's no language schools, there was no business school that would tell you how to surmount any cultural barriers. That was the world that I think is even more, in many ways, more fascinating than the world we live in today.
Is it the point of a business school to learn about like how to fuck? There it is. I've been picked up again. All right, we're out. We're out. Yeah, I guess I will make, what is it? How about the 17th century England? How they would bet as much of the silver coinage as possible, ship the silver to China for gold, and thereby cause all kind of problems from the shortage of hard money. Not better. Not bet, gather. Yeah, it still got censored. You're still playing on my phone. Yeah, well, that didn't work. Yeah. Oh, well. Oh, well, we're out. This is bullshit. I wonder why this is happening. Fine. Look, I guess